So again, this nothing that we talk about. I mean, the goal is not to kind of share this presentation publicly, but I think for people who are in the company who may not be able to attend or who may not be able to participate or maybe came earlier, we're going to record it just so you have access to the comments, the contributions if you want to watch at some point. So maybe we'll start off today with just a short introduction. I mean, the idea that Liz and I spoke about this a couple weeks ago, I think part of the idea was to think about how to sort of prepare for the holidays, because the holidays in general, you know, let's say in the movies or culturally, we think about them as sort of hopefully a joyous time or time to do something fun or enjoyable, be away from work. But just like this slide says, you know, the holidays, time away or time with family or time for fun or vacation, it's not always all pleasant or all good. It doesn't mean it can't be good or it has to be bad or it has to be stressful, but the goal is to acknowledge what some of the challenges might be and to think about how to navigate them. Because anytime, you know, for people, for human beings, we confront challenges every day, whether they're at work, outside of work, in terms of decisions we make, how we handle relationships, how we handle challenging situations, how we take care of ourselves, all that stuff. It's kind of like an everyday thing. It's an everyday adventure, journey, so to speak. So we'll just do kind of very short introduction about ourselves, and then we'll get into, you know, today's topic. But Jake, I don't know if you, Jake and I work together at a company called Start My Wellness. You know, we're a mental and physical wellness firm, and we partner with your organization to offer emotional wellness services to the employees, psychotherapy, medication. We're going to have a dietitian student that's going to join our team. We do group work, all kinds of stuff to help people improve their quality of life. So Jake and I work together at the firm. So maybe Jake, if you could say just a couple words about yourself.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here. I'm really glad that we're talking about this topic, because I think inevitably it is something that we will go through every single year. And it's something that every single year can cause people stress and have all different kind of effects other than what you would like it to have. And so it's an important topic to talk about. And I think in doing so, you can actually develop skills that could help you to navigate the holidays going forward, or even family gatherings, whatever it might be, and kind of apply this elsewhere. And because we always have holidays coming up, so it makes sense.
Right, that's a good point, Jake, because I think oftentimes when people think about therapy or wellness, you know, they sort of talk about like what kind of tools, you know, can I get, what kind of skill, and part of our focus today is going to be on the internal skill set, the skill set that's within you, learning how to manage your emotions or interact with people. It's a lot of the things for therapy have to do with how do you know more about yourself and use your self-knowledge to improve your life and improve your interactions with others. So, okay, so we covered the point that the holidays can be challenging. And then maybe we'll just say a couple words here about our sort of overall philosophy. And I can tell you, so I'm the director of the clinic, and I've been a therapist for about 15 years. And one of the things that's, I think, commonly not known or not said or talked about therapy is really the goal is self-knowledge, meaning not only your history and your kind of relationships in your life, but also learning to pay attention to what's going on with you. How do you feel? How do you think? You know, people often will joke and say, oh, you're a therapist? How do you feel about that? You know, it's sort of a derisive joke, I guess, but therapy is much more about using your feelings and your thoughts and your experiences to make good decisions. If you can pay attention to yourself and kind of decode what's going on with me, what are my priorities? What do I want to do today? What's my life like? If you can pay attention to that internal information and use it wisely, you're going to make a much better decision. It's just like being able to say when you're hungry or when you're tired or when you're thirsty. All of that is decoding internal. Nobody's telling you you're thirsty usually. You're using your own sensations and thoughts to make that decision and say, okay, I can use some water. So therapy has to do with how to use thoughts, feelings, experiences to decode, so to speak, what's my experience like in this relationship or at work or with my family or in the house, whatever, right? So I think Jake and I are on the same page here, but our biggest focus here is during this holiday season, for example, how can you use your internal information, what's going on with you? How can you take a moment to pay attention to yourself to make helpful decisions? And and you could say maybe that there's not a lot of time for that, or it's hard to do when you're busy, which is true. It's a learned skill. You have to practice, it's kind of like taking your pulse. You have to kind of get in the habit of taking stock of where you are at a given moment and a given day to be able to use that information. So it's kind of like having a Fitbit, except it's an internal sort of monitoring, not electronic device. So Jake, I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but that's kind of our overall view.
Yeah, kind of off of that topic really quickly, time-wise, these are quick skills that, like Anton said, you can practice throughout the day in different contexts and bring up for yourself and make it a habit, just checking in with yourself in general. And it's a skill that will seep into other aspects of your life. I wanted to just kind of touch on a couple of key words that Anton mentioned. One, being prepared, preparation. This is kind of about being prepared for the holidays. And so in order to be prepared for something, you have to have some data, some knowledge, some prior experience that you can use to create a plan so that you are prepared for the situation. And I think something to think about as we talk and as you go into the holidays is, how can you use your past experiences with your family, with all of the challenges that you think of when it comes to the holidays? How can you use that as data to then create a plan for yourself? And in addition to that, I think another key word is expectations. I think this is really important because, again, this is something that happens every year. And so we can use this data from our experiences to set realistic expectations of, what is this going to be like for me?
Sure.
What is my experience like with my family during the holidays? What is it like having to get gifts? All of these things. And then from there, you can make these adjustments based on those expectations. And I think if you can kind of look at it in that sort of model of analyzing your experiences, looking within, figuring out what is it that is a challenge for you, determining how do you create that plan, what are the expectations, and how do you adjust according to what those expectations are.
For sure. Right, that makes a lot of sense. You learn from your experience, you have some ideas going in, and then you probably have to modify depending on, like for example, right now, obviously we're in this COVID time, so holidays might look different, family interactions might look different, maybe somewhat more back to normal than a year ago, but still it's sort of a transformed world where things are different, people interact differently, maybe you've lost somebody in your family, there's a lot of changes in the world today, partially based on COVID. And so it's expectations might be different, but you want to be able to have some ideas going in, and you want to be able to adjust in the moment, try to adjust in the moment, be thoughtful about it. So one of the topics, maybe we could, we have sort of like a few topics that really came out in the survey that we thought were important items that we could kind of talk about as a group, and then hopefully to make it into a dialogue. Again, something that we would love to hear your thoughts about how you navigate these situations, and we can think about them together, because, and Jake and I will share some of our own experiences, because our goal here is not to say, hey, we're therapists, we do everything perfectly, our lives are smooth, and we never have conflicts with people or overreact. That obviously that's not true, and it wouldn't be true for anybody, because that's not realistic. But what we try to do is to hopefully use these sort of internal skill sets to sort of, respond a little bit differently or better than maybe we would be responding without them. So that's really our focus here. Is we're people too, and we're going to share some of our own kind of comments, but hopefully we can have an interaction with your group. So these are some of the things that came out in the survey, having to do with comments people made. So for example, there was a question in the survey about, what do you dread, about the holidays, or there's some things that people are excited about, but the excited things are sort of easier. Probably we're talking more about the things that are maybe somewhat more challenging or anxiety producing. So for example, managing time, how do I actually make the most of this time and sort of make decisions about what I'm going to do, who I'm going to spend time with. If I'm taking time off, I want to make sure that time is well used and used in a way that benefits me or my family, is kind of optimized, so to speak. People mention things like, there's lots of people to see. How do I make those decisions? Who do I see, you know, who do I spend the most time with? How's that going to affect my relationships? How do I prioritize? What if I can't see somebody and they're out of town or they're in a different country or different times, you know, different part of the country? Another comment was cleaning, gifts, stress. You know, how do I deal with kind of, again, I'm not taking care of work responsibilities, but I may have family responsibilities such as keeping the house clean, getting the family organized, or things like that. So these were some of the things that came up. And so we thought we would start here as a kind of initial starting point of these are some of the stressors. Now, how do we respond to it? How do we deal with it? What are some of the sort of skills that we're talking about? So Jake, I don't know if you feel free to jump in, or I could say a comment here.
Yeah, one thing I would say is, again, along the lines of kind of skills from other areas, is to think about how do you best prepare for other things that are coming up in your life. You know, when it's related to work, whatever it might be, how do you best prepare? Is it lists? Is it drawing it out? Is it talking it out? Whatever it is. And then think about how can I apply that here?
For sure. Maybe, I don't know if somebody's mic was off, but yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so right, so you have some sort of strategies going in, right? Another vantage point here might be, again, to go back to the idea of checking in with yourself. I can give you an example in terms of how do you decide who to spend time with? Like my family's from Russia, so I grew up in Moscow, and in Moscow and Russia, our big holiday during the year was New Year's, like kind of the way Christmas is in America. For us, New Year's was the time of family time, gift giving, things like that. And as I got older and I grew up in America, I kind of confronted the decision of, well, this is supposed to be family time. I'm sort of culturally supposed to be spending time with my parents or doing things with them, even though I'm an adult, and that really maybe doesn't make much sense. But how do you navigate those sort of decisions? That's just one example. But again, my point here would be that when it comes to things like managing your time or deciding who you're going to prioritize, you have to really be thoughtful and honest with yourself about trying to do things that actually make sense to you. In other words, what do you actually care about? Because you don't want to make decisions based on what somebody else's expectations might be or who might want you to do X, Y, Z. Of course, we want to be considerate of other people, but you have to probably start with yourself and really think through, what do I actually want to do? What would be the best way to use this time? You know, what's kind of most important to me? And how can I try to make that happen? Now, maybe you don't always know what the answer is to those questions, or maybe you could use the help of a friend or a partner or, you know, a coworker to kind of think through, well, what do I actually want to do during this holiday season? But if you don't check in with yourself and actually do it in a thoughtful, intentional kind of way, you're likely not going to use the time as wisely as you would have otherwise. You know what I mean? Often, I think if you look back, you know, sort of hindsight, you could say, oh, wow, I could have done this, I could have done that. Well, partially, you know, the future is unknown, so you can't always predict things, but it's good to be intentional and mindful about, okay, let me take a moment to think, okay, I have 2 weeks off, for example, or 5 days, or, you know, whatever the time might be. What do I actually want to do? Who do I want to see? And what's realistic? You know, there's also the question of what's within reality? What's actually possible to me? What can I do in a given period of time? I used to have this friend in college who would go to the library and take out like 10 really interesting books, and they would all be sitting on her shelf. And she would kind of not get around to reading them because the books were all interesting, but she was so kind of torn between reading one and the other that she ended up kind of feeling just overwhelmed and not really reading them at all. And I think later maybe she changed her approach, but it was sort of funny because, yeah, I mean, it's exciting to have a lot of opportunities and a lot of options, but you also want to be choosy in terms of, okay, within the constraints of reality, what's really most important to you? How are you going to decide it? And how are you going to be true to what you actually think and feel, and try to really keep that in mind? You don't have to just think about yourself because you might have other important people in your life, but you want to try to include your own considerations into your thought process of how are you going to make these decisions. So those are just some kind of overall comments, but I don't know if there's any experiences in our group, any thoughts about how do people navigate this? What's worked for you? What hasn't? What does it look like for you in terms of deciding how you use your time, who you spend time with, what activities you do or you don't do? What have been some of the experiences in our group? Maybe we could talk together about kind of the stresses and challenges, the pros and cons, you know, things that work, things that don't. Might be a useful kind of point of departure for a conversation. Any comments from from anybody on the call?
Well, my name is John Mallory.
Hey,
You, sounds kind of broken up when I talk. Um, but for me, it's all about prioritizing because I have a pretty big family, and we really split it up between Thanksgiving and Christmas. If I'm going to my wife's family for Christmas, we'll visit mine for Thanksgiving. And so, yeah, it's all about just making that list and prioritizing who you want to see and how much you want to see them. And, if my aunt's going to be at my parents', then I try to make it when my aunt's going to be there. So it's, it's a longer process than just waking up Christmas and, who am I going to see today?
for sure. That makes a lot of sense. What do you think? Thanks for sharing that. What would you say what are the challenges you confront? Do you ever feel torn between what you should do or what somebody else might think or feel, right? I mean, there's a lot of decisions to make.
Yeah. Well, my father has dementia. So, I can go visit him every day and he really doesn't remember it.
Right.
But it's yeah, I mean, I'm torn because I want to see my parents, of course, a lot, and they're further away than my wife's parents. So yeah, I'm torn, but I have 3 kids that are the most important. So I put them in front of, what I need, but then, if I have to take time, I just do it. If I need to go see my dad, I just go see him. And sometimes it's by myself, sometimes it's with the family.
Yeah.
Yeah, John, I like what you said there too about you mentioned that when your aunt is with your family, you try to go there to see your aunt. That's something that you personally clearly enjoy. That's something for you during the holidays that
Exactly.
nice. And so you're pursuing that, and that makes the holidays more enjoyable for you. And those are the things that matter.
Mm-hmm.
I also appreciated the point about kind of doing the hard work up front, right? Because I think one of the challenges of adulthood in general is you have to do a lot of thinking to kind of make your life work. It's tempting to just say, okay, I'll just wake up and kind of go for it and see what happens, which is, I'm not saying that's wrong. That might be fun as well. But when you have a big family like you, that makes a lot of sense to me that you invest some time in kind of really thinking, sort of budgeting your time in a thoughtful way and trying to make the most of it, because you have a lot of people that are important to you. So without putting some energy into thinking about that, you're probably not going to see them as much as you would really want to, or would be better for you. So thanks for sharing that.
No problem.
Any other comments from the group about this particular question about managing your time? We have a few other topics, so you can comment another time if you want to, but.
I have something. This is Erica. So I am a single person and I don't have kids. This might be a little bit easier for me than other people, but I've kind of just over the past couple of years stopped hanging out with people, family, friends who it's not worth it for me when it's busy. I don't go to big family events for Christmas anymore. I do the small things with my parents because it doesn't make me happy, and I'm an adult and I don't have to do things I don't want to do. So the family members that I do want to see, I make other time for them, and Christmas is just a day like every other day, technically. So
for sure.
That's my coping strategy, I guess, is
That's
to
great.
Prioritize the people I actually want to see.
That's great. It sounds very effective.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Eric. I think you make a good point too, in that we have relationships with these people outside of the holidays. And so it's not that we have to make everything the most special for everybody that we possibly can at this one time. We have relationships at all times, and so we can maintain those and pick and choose what is best for us during the holiday times. It's a very good point.
Right, that's a great point. And also, just to add to that, I mean, I think sometimes, I think the word realistic sometimes can be used in a harsh way, like, oh, just be realistic, or that's unrealistic. But I think in what you're bringing up, Erica, what I appreciate about that is there's a good sense of reality there in terms of, okay, what kind of events do you like? Or when's the best time for you to spend time with your family, or which family members, or what kind of feels most beneficial to you? I think being able to realistically assess your own wants and needs and the situation is such a crucial skill that you're much better off being realistic than you are kind of in a fantasizing, sort of saying like, oh, it'll just work out, or, you know, or this is my only option, or, you know what I mean? You're using your mind to think about, okay, how can you, everything's sort of to some degree, a calculation. How can I optimize the things that I really like, and the things that I enjoy, and the things that have the most meaning for me? And how can I try to reduce it's like traffic, right? You're probably better off not driving somewhere at 5 p.m. because, unless you have to, because that's when everybody's on the road and you're just gonna be stuck kind of losing time. But so if you have the option during the holidays of making these kind of decisions that both our contributors mentioned, you'd probably be better off because you're going to do it in a wiser, more rewarding way. It might not be as kind of, it's not a movie scene where everything just works out and everything's, you know, beautiful, but it's much more realistic and rewarding in a realistic kind of a thoughtful way. So I appreciate those. Thank you for bringing those comments up. One of the comments that also came up in the survey that was kind of frequently mentioned had to do with gifts, gift giving. I mean, I personally think that our society maybe, at least in my opinion, has gone off the rails a little bit with gift giving, and to some degree it's kind of over the top. I mean, yeah, sure, our economy is a consumer economy, so I guess it sort of benefits, you know, maybe there's benefits that way, but the whole pressure to give gifts at a particular time of year, at a particular timetable, in a particular way, seems sort of unreasonable. I mean, you save most of your gift giving for one time a year and spend a bunch of money. That doesn't, if somebody stood back and said, is that really a wise thing to do? We probably wouldn't say that's very wise or reasonable. But okay, that's sort of, in a way, that's a way that our society is organized. So we thought we'd talk about this topic in terms of how do people go about this question, because again, it might not be the most meaningful question, but it is something that people confront and face and think about. And it's a useful example of, again, how to put this skill set to work. So I think, Jake, we talked before ahead of this, so I thought you had some useful comments here.
Yeah. One of the big things that could be important here is to really consider why you're giving a gift and what does that gift actually mean. Because really, it's really unfortunate that we have to have a sort of guilty feelings during these times with our loved ones, friends, and family. And so one thought is that, you know, guilt may come from a fear or a concern that, you know, if I don't get this person a gift, that they're going to be upset. They're not going to think that, but they're going to think that I'm not caring, or I didn't consider them, or whatever it might be. And so underneath the actual gift itself is, you know, the representation of how you care about that person. And so it could be worth thinking about how else could you show somebody that you care about them in that way without buying an extravagant gift, you know, emptying your wallet, you know, going above your budget, spending too much time doing it, whatever it is. Personally, myself, I kind of see it as a two-way street as well. It's not just about me getting a gift for the person and getting them exactly what they want. It's about, I'm included in this. I'm giving the gift and I want the gift to be meaningful. I want it to feel meaningful and have something to do with our relationship. And so oftentimes I will do homemade gifts. I will write a genuine letter. I do origami, so I'll make a origami out of a $20 bill, whatever it is, and give it to somebody in the shape of something they enjoy. That's kind of my personal perspective, and I wanted to share that just kind of as an example of how there's a different element to gift giving other than just spending money and getting people the things that they want. You know, there's more to it, and you can choose for it to be that way if you'd like.
Right, I think it makes sense. Thanks, Jake. Any comments from our group about this? Again, we're not talking about, the goal here is not to say, hey, here's the ideal, here's what you should do, here's how to do it, because there may be some ideals, but there is no perfect way of handling any of these situations. And you also have to think about what's realistic. I mean, yeah, if not buying a trinket for your uncle is going to really piss him off, I guess, and it's easier to avoid his rage by buying him something, I guess you can still do it. But the question is to try to be thoughtful, realistic, and grounded in what do you actually care about, what actually works for you and your family, and how could you approach it? So, any comments from our group about that? What do people think about what's worked for you, what hasn't, what's challenging about gift giving? I mean, to Jake's point, yeah, I personally would much rather buy like a simple gift, would write somebody a nice note or a card or call them and tell them that my relationship with them is important or they're important to me, because that's just much more meaningful to me. Okay, maybe I can't make 100 phone calls, but I'd much rather communicate something that actually why I value the person in my life much more than spending money on a gift. Now, because most of the time when I end up buying gifts on this kind of timetable, they're sort of meaningless. They might not be that useful anyway. I buy them almost like as a performance of, meeting the expectations, but that doesn't always work so well. And again, I don't mean there's always some other perfect solution, but what do people think about what's worked for you in terms of this? How have you solved this problem, or how have you tried to solve it? What do people find as a good approach?
Well, for me, I always try to, again, we do a lot of planning because I have 3 kids, and so it's more or less just finding out really what they need more than what they want, and trying to get that nice in between, get them a little bit of what they want, but mostly what they need. And when it comes to my outside family, it's more of, yeah, we don't do a lot of like a wallet or anything. It really does have to mean something. you know or the best gift that we've given recently is just giving them time, and that's going to go see them, uh going to go see people that we haven't seen for a while, more than just family, just friends that you may not have seen all year long, and we're like, well, let's carve out a day and go see somebody. And that's more of a Christmas thing for us, because my wife's Jewish, so we have Hanukkah and then we have Christmas, and this year we had Thanksgiving right into Hanukkah, and now Christmas. So we're always quite busy when it comes to this time of year. So it's really a strain on us to to make time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And plus, I mean, if you think about it realistically, of course, time is one of the most valuable things we have. You could buy all kinds of gifts, but the gift of spending time with somebody is much more priceless, of course. So yeah, I appreciate your comments, because it's like a way of really being in touch with what are my values? What do I actually, what does giving a gift really mean to somebody? What's the point of the giving? Well, if the point is to acknowledge them or show appreciation or tell them that the relationship is meaningful to you, there are many ways of doing that, such as spending time with them. And so that may be just a much more rewarding. It's not maybe as, we're sort of a society of instant gratification. You open gifts, you buy stuff. I mean, that stuff can be fun too, but the things that you're talking about, I think, are much more long lasting. They're actually improve relationship. They're a way of saying, this is what really matters to us: spending time together, doing nice things, planning ahead of time. Those are great communications about what you care about, and they kind of help to develop those values and develop those relationships with your kids, I'm sure, and with your family. So that's I really like that. I think that's a very kind of, so to speak, down to earth approach in terms of not being caught up in the endless sort of race of buying things, accumulating things. That could feel very limiting or very shallow in the long term. I don't mean gifts are bad, or it's nice if somebody bought me, I don't know, like one time, my girl, somebody I was dating at the time, bought me like a nice stereo system. It was amazing. I love music, so it was a really nice gift. But that gift was based on knowing a lot about me and what I actually care about and what actually matters to me, and something that I was reluctant to spending money on myself. So it was a very thoughtful gift based on knowing my interests and kind of my own I wasn't going to buy it. So that was like a really thoughtful thing. But I think we have a comment from Dean, I believe.
Not a comment, but a question. So these are all good thoughts for us as maybe like the receiver of gifts, but how do you communicate that to, let me see if I can rephrase this, but so there's some expectation of gifts, knowing the person well enough that you can determine what gift that is, but if you're distant from one another so long, but yet that expectation is still there, it becomes a challenge to find the gift or a gift that's appropriate.
Sure.
So while I think, I'm appreciative of, Erica and what she said earlier about she's chosen or she chooses, I think that's incredibly brave that you choose what you're going to be doing. You're an adult and you choose that, but somehow or another, it seems after time that you feel like to a degree you get trapped into what is the expectation or traditions that surrounded that, and particularly with the gift giving and expectations for those within your family or friends, mainly family, and not being able to determine that. How do you set those expectations without offending or hurting somebody's feelings?
That's a really good question. Go ahead, Jake.
I have a comment on that. I think one thing to keep in mind is that we definitely, you're right, especially during this time, we've been living very distant from each other. Communication has been different, and we are not mind readers. And so we can't just know exactly what's going to make that person happy, what's going to, what is it that person even wants. And so I think that there's definitely nothing harmful in just asking, what is it that you're into right now? What do you enjoy? I think people are appreciative of that kind of forethought. And it takes a load off of your shoulders. You don't have to make a decision. Granted, that may not work for everybody. There may be expectations in your family in which you should be able to know what people want and need. And that for a lot of reasons can be very difficult, but I think it's also considerate to ask somebody what they would like, because you'd much rather get somebody something that they're actually going to use and that they actually want and like, as opposed to something that isn't going to mean much to them.
That's a good thought. I thank you for that. And yes, I tried that approach, but it's kind of like going out on a date when you decide on which where you're going to go to eat, and everybody says, "I don't know."
Right, and then you just take a chance for sure. I think another option, Dean, might be that I would probably, you could take a chance on getting them a gift, but if it were me, I'd probably get like a card and write out a message and say, hey, I really kind of struggled to buy you a gift this year because we haven't talked as much, but it doesn't mean I haven't been thinking about you or I don't wonder what's important to you. In fact, I wish maybe we were in touch more or I haven't seen you as much. In other words, I personally find that clear communication can be helpful. Not everybody responds to that, but I would try to, whatever gift you decide on, I would try to consider, is there a way to convey the larger message? Because the larger message is that the person's important to you. You do think about them. You do want to pick a gift that would matter to them, but you're not always sure what that is. So you picked X, Y, Z, but in reality, what would be even better if next year, for example, you could stay in touch more or kind of revive your relationship if possible, so that next, gift giving season, you're kind of more prepared. Not that gift giving is the most important part, but the fact that the relationship or the reviving of the relationship actually matters to you and you do care and you are invested in having a good connection with them. I mean, as long as you actually feel that way, that would be another option, I think.
I think that one hit dead on. So I appreciate it. That's a good thought.
For sure. And thanks for your question. That's because I do think your point, Dean, is a very good one in terms of it's very easy to get locked in. Many times we end up doing things, kind of going through the motions without communication, without language, without like, I used to have a teacher who would say, it's like if you, whatever kind of relationship you're in, sometimes the music comes on and you're doing the dance and each person is doing their own portion, but you're not stopping to say like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing it this kind of way? Or why, so the question is, you want to try to find a way to convey and have a discussion. The discussion doesn't have to be about the gift necessarily, but about the relationship, how you relate, how you think about them. That's, unfortunately, again, our holidays have started to turn into more rituals than about, okay, spending time with each other and saying, hey, what was your year like? Or what are you looking forward to next year? Or, for example, like sometimes I think this is, many families do this, that this year on Thanksgiving, somebody said, oh, again, this is not a novel idea, but they said, let's go around the table and say what you're thankful for. Personally, I think that's much more meaningful and useful to me than, I mean, great food, I think is delicious, but that kind of communication, I think, is a really way to get to know somebody. What was their year like? What was their month like? What was their day like? What's to really hear and get to know them. So it's not, we don't always have unlimited time, obviously, but to at least try to go in that direction. Maybe one thing that's could create meaning around the gift, around the relationship. Okay, let's see. Our next slide has to do with arguments and difficult communications and in-laws, or just situations that might be challenging, conflictual situations. It could be with anybody, our own family, friends, spouses, children. Arguments or difficult communications are unfortunately a part of human relationships, because when we're around people, you're going to have different points of view. You're going to have different experiences. You're going to be stressed. You're not always going to be kind of at your most mindful, empathic self every day, whether it's at work or at home. And so these things come up inevitably, and they don't have to be bad, but they do come up, and it's good to think about what's good, to go to Jake's point, what's the game plan? What am I coming in with? And then how do I respond in the moment? So I don't know if anybody wanted to jump in here, or Jake, if you have an example, but this is, I think, a crucial area, because arguments and kind of tensions are, in my view, at least inevitable. I don't mean they have to happen or they should, but you're going to have different points of view. You're going to be not at your best all the time, which is totally fine. It's okay. And it's very understandable. But how do you notice that? And how do you navigate? How do you respond to it in the least hurtful way possible? You know what I mean? You want to try to minimize the damage and sort of catch yourself early. How might you do that? So any experiences in our group, or any questions is fine. I'm glad that Dean, you brought up a question, because it could be an experience or it could be a question you have. We want to talk about it, as a group.
This is Erica again.
Yeah, please.
My brothers have very differing political views from me, and they bring it up a lot. And it upsets my mom greatly when we start shouting at each other. So how can I just change the topic gracefully, or should I just ignore them? I don't know.
It's a great question. For sure. I don't know, Jake, if you want to jump in with that, I'm happy to add it too.
Well, I think this is a great question, because I think this is definitely something that is probably a more common issue for people when they get together with family. I think this kind of goes back to the idea of taking stock of yourself and how your experiences have been so far, right? You know that it upsets your mom and that it's an issue. And so the topic needs to be on a different level. And so perhaps going in with a plan and knowing that, okay, politics is not going to work, period. It never does. And so therefore, if it comes up, maybe I can ask about them. I could ask them something. That's always a good thing to do, is to ask somebody a question about themselves that's not related to a topic that you're looking to avoid. People like to talk about themselves. And so that's a route that you can always go if you're looking for something. But that is a really challenging thing. And I think you have to take into consideration who these people are, what, based on your experience with them, what do you know about them? What would be effective? What wouldn't be effective? You probably know your brothers best and could probably determine what that would be. But yeah, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a nice point. And I think part of the challenge also is, you probably know going in that it's not really a conversation where people are necessarily going to be changing their mind, you or them, you sort of have your own positions. But one thing that I found helpful is I have these conversations with my dad sometimes. My dad likes to send out these wacky emails, or he'll say sometimes oh, I know you young people, you're all socialists, and not that there's anything wrong with socialism, but I'll say Dad, I I don't even know, you don't even know my political views. I don't know where you're coming from. But lately, the approach that I've taken with him is I just try to kind of sympathize with how he feels. If he says, oh, America's in decline or this and this and this, I just say, yeah, Dad, you're right. It's really bad. And yeah, it is sad. And then try to sort of move on to a different topic, because fighting with him or trying to get him to change his mind is not going to work. I don't agree with some of his perceptions. I don't think they're accurate, but that doesn't matter. The goal is I just try to say, how can I try to preserve our relationship? Because to me, at the end of the day, what I don't want to do is argue and yell at him and say something not nice, then feel bad the next day and have to call and say, hey, Dad, I got riled up as well. So I try to just respond. For you, in your situation, Erica, if I heard your brother say that, I would probably say, yeah, I know that's how you feel and that's your point of view. And hey, okay, everybody's entitled to their own vantage point. I got you. Can we try to just focus on something else? I get it. That's where you're coming from. I don't necessarily see it that way, but is it possible to spend our time talking about another topic, which is going to be more enjoyable? You know what I mean? I would just try to address it in a thoughtful, respectful way. You don't have to agree or disagree with them, but I would acknowledge that I don't really want to go there. That's what I say to my dad all the time. I say, Dad, I know you're a passionate guy. I respect it, but let's pause right there, because if I go any further, he might say something that I feel triggered by. I'll overreact. It's not productive, right? So I think you can acknowledge, yep, I get it. You care about that. You're passionate about it. I know. Yeah, I get it. But can we spend this time in a way that everybody can be included, where your mom can be included, you can be included, your brothers, where everybody can participate in a way that's not hurtful or damaging? That's just one, that's one vantage point. Anybody else from our group? Well, how do you handle it with your family? How do you approach the situations? How do you address them? What do you do? What do you do? Because these things inevitably, I think, come up. And unfortunately, I think they come up in a way that's not always productive. You know what I mean? I wish we could have more productive, useful conversations, but usually they end up being not always, or not necessarily the most helpful things.
This sounds terrible, but I'm just going to say it anyways. Whenever there's certain topics like what Erica brought up or anything else where there's disagreements, usually it's my parents that are the ones that are saying these things, and me and my brother will just be like, yep, okay. And then behind their backs, essentially, we're like, oh, they're crazy. And we'll just vent about whatever the situation is with them. But like you said, preserving that relationship, just kind of diffusing it and just letting it roll off our shoulders, but then getting our frustrations about what they potentially said. Me and my brother will just kind of have those sidebar conversations, and maybe not the most healthy way to do it, but it works for us. So.
They probably do that with you. They probably say, oh,
probably
they're crazy for sure. I think you have to have room for, that sounds to me like a respectful way of doing it. You're thinking about the person in the moment, you're responding in a nice way. You're not just trash talking them when you talk with your brother. You're saying, yeah, that was frustrating, or that was difficult, or I can't believe we're having that conversation again. That's not the same thing as saying, they're horrible and you don't want them in your life. That's saying, yeah, that situation I didn't like, or I don't like how they're going about it. You're free to disagree with anybody you want. What's a healthy way of managing it can be very problematic, because there isn't just one healthy way of managing it. You could assess health, you can assess the value of a coping skill based on how it affects your life. In your situation, Liz, you're saying, I found a way to both kind of reduce the stress in the moment and vent at a later time that doesn't do damage to anybody. It doesn't hurt your relationship with your parents. Maybe it enhances your relationship with your brother, because you have sort of a mutual thing. You can say, yeah, that was, we don't like that. But there's nobody who's being hurt in that situation. It's okay to, feel frustrated with somebody. Just try to handle your frustration in a reasonable way, which I think your example is a very good one. You know what I mean? So I would say the value of a coping skill is, does it help your life? Does it create problems? And is it kind of adaptive? I think your example is very adaptive, and I wish maybe it would be applied more often, because we have people who get into sort of brawls with each other that are not going to solve anything, and are not, they might create more problems than good.
I completely agree with Anton. Liz, I think that's a good approach. And in addition to that, I think you're doing yourself a favor by acknowledging your feelings of frustration afterwards, right? It's not going to do you and your brother any good if you go through that experience being frustrated, and then you just sit with it and you continue to be frustrated. It definitely is healthy to talk about that, talk about your feelings on it, and then move on.
And I think a part of that is paying attention to yourself. When you feel like you're in these family interactions, I think it's easy when you're kind of, maybe you're tired or whatever, to sort of react in the moment impulsively. But you'll probably be much better off sort of just being a little bit more mindful of your own temperature. Like we did a presentation a few months ago, and this person used the analogy of, we talked about it as like a thermostat. You know what I mean? You want to just make sure to try to, when you can, take your own temperature. Is this conversation riling me up? How am I feeling about it? What's my response? And use that as a gauge of, hey, do I need to step away? Do I need to kind of take a breather, so to speak? I don't mean never get worked up. I'm just saying that's just a way to kind of monitor your own sort of temperature, so to speak, and think, okay, how am I feeling about this conversation? Do I want to engage? Do I want to say, yep, I know, I understand, and sort of walk away? Because you don't want to, fighting with somebody usually is not very productive, right? Unless it's an actual, you know, if you want to have an actual open, frank conversation, that can be good, but these conversations are not usually like that. Okay, we have one more important topic that was mentioned in the survey, which is having to do with loss. And it's a topic that I think is kind of sad, but also important and meaningful, because loss is a part of our life. It could be many losses in terms of somebody actually dying, or family traditions changing, or people relocating, or, you know, it could be a lot of different things that could feel like a loss or a change, or the way things used to be, or the way we wish they were. It's a very important thing that I think sometimes we notice during the holidays, because let's say a person is not, you know, not alive and they're not able to participate, or they're debilitated, or they've relocated, or, you know, or you got in a fight with them and they're not showing up, or, you know, whatever. So loss is an important topic and a meaningful one. And so we thought we'd take a couple of minutes to talk about this as well. I know, again, Jake, I know you had a particular useful viewpoint here.
Yeah, just something to put out here. I think in my experience, I think one of the more effective ways to deal with loss, and Anton makes a good point that it could be somebody passing away, it could be a family tradition changing, people moving away. But one of the better ways to do it is to talk about it. Just like loss in general, when we're grieving, one of the most important things to do is to allow yourself to grieve, is to actually talk about the loss and to talk about how you're feeling about it, what's different, what it's like. And everyone's aware that that person is missing, right? You can feel the void. That's what makes it hard. And it doesn't help to keep that void empty. What really helps is to fill it. And you can do that with memories, talking about somebody who passed away, talking about what it was like when they were around, and the great memories that you did have, because those memories are there regardless. And unfortunately, the people aren't. And so one of the best things that you can do for yourself is to kind of fill that space, fill that void with memories or thoughts of that person. And in a sense, you're helping to keep them around. That personally, in my experience, I have found that to be helpful when it comes to loss and to family gatherings, because you oftentimes get to some very funny stories and people end up laughing and moods change, and it is beneficial. So I just wanted to share that thought.
For sure. Right. That makes sense. And also that, kind of going along with what you're saying, Jake, that both things are true. The sadness and the kind of missing the person is maybe a part of your experience, but also the pleasant memories and things about them that you really like. Like I recently had a very close mentor that died just a month ago. And yeah, it's very sad to not have him in my life, but thinking about the memories and the good times we sort of shared together, it doesn't make him come back to life, obviously, but it is a kind of a pleasant reminder of what I value about the relationship, what was meaningful to me about it, what I would want if I had another mentor, for example, what I would want to hopefully have with another person. You know, so there are many positives that you could remember. They're not always positives. Maybe the person who's gone, the experiences may not have been so positive with them. So, but to acknowledge both sets of feelings, so to speak, is important. You don't want to just acknowledge that, oh, I miss them, or just the, oh, I wish they were here. You know, being able to be honest with yourself of, I missed them, but I'm glad they're gone, but they were a pain in the ass, or you know, whatever it was, whatever the feelings are, it's important to be able to be honest with yourself, because it's like any kind of reality situation. If you have a good assessment of what the situation is, you'll be able to deal with it more effectively. If you pretend you don't feel a certain way or something didn't happen, your ability to respond to it is going to be limited. So being able to acknowledge, the reason that acknowledging how you feel and what you think is helpful is because it gives you a broader picture, a better data set of like, what actually happened, what was my experience, and how could I potentially respond to it? When you have the full data set, you could respond in a more adaptive way than kind of a limited data set, so to speak. So any comments from our group? I mean, we only have a few minutes here for today, and actually, I'm sure Jake would share this opinion, but we really appreciate people's contributions. It's really nice to hear from your group and kind of your experiences, because again, to go back to the beginning, we're going through the holidays too. It's not like our lives are somehow removed from the challenges we're talking about. We deal with them too. We try to deal with them using our sort of skill sets, sometimes more effectively, sometimes less. But the goal is to kind of make the effort, to sort of put in the effort to say, what can I learn about what hasn't worked for me before and change? Or what can I learn from what has worked and apply it? You know what I mean? We always want to just try to, in my view, kind of make the most of the situation and do what you can to kind of make your life as meaningful or as rewarding as realistically possible. That's all. Any comments from our group about anything we talked about, or loss, or dealing with loss, any experiences you want to share? It's a difficult topic, I think, but it's real, and it's real for all of us, because you can't avoid change, and loss is a part of life, and it's hard and it's not easy, but that doesn't mean it's unmanageable or it has to be debilitating, but you better off acknowledging, you know, it's kind of like a long climb up a mountain. You take many, many steps along the way to get to the top, so to speak, to a place where you can deal with the loss more effectively, or it's more manageable, but it's a long walk, so to speak, and it takes a lot of practice and trial and error and support to kind of try to navigate that kind of change, especially if it's somebody who's important to you. It's definitely kind of a long distance sort of travel journey. Okay, so we have just a couple minutes left. Again, I want to thank everybody for joining the phone call, the Zoom, for your participation. I know that you probably have gotten a lot of communications about this from Liz, but our group is available we do individual work, we do group work, we do medication management. That doesn't mean that our point here is not to do a sales pitch, but it's just to say that if some of these topics or things interest you, if you're curious about how do I handle situations, how do I go about relationships, how do I make decisions, if those things are things you're curious about yourself, how you do them, if you want to work on them, continue to learn them, that's the kind of work that we're in. We want to help people improve their quality of life, to be more knowledgeable and more thoughtful about who they are, what they do, how they go about it, so that you can try to kind of make your life as rewarding as hopefully it can be. That's the true field of mental health, in a sense, is going about that approach. That's the line of work that we're in, and it's nice to have this opportunity, and hopefully we can do other sort of workshops, you know, throughout the year if there's an opportunity. But either way, just great to chat with all of you, and thanks for your participation.
Yeah, thank you for your time, everyone. It was really nice to be here. I think this is definitely an important topic, and I'm glad we were able to hear some of your thoughts. Really appreciate that. It was nice. Thank you.
Liz, any closing comments, Liz? Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Somebody's going to speak.
No, just saying thanks.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for your time again. Apologies once again for the error of communication, but I did have quite a few people reach out and they're like, please send me the webinar. So I'll go ahead and do that once we wrap.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time, and we'll definitely look forward to future workshops. I think these are very beneficial, just to hear from everybody else and different perspectives and ways that you can go about things. So really appreciate it, everyone.
Sounds great. Okay, everybody, take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.